Welcome back to the Kushtka channel, everyone. I got a fun one for you today. Today we're going to be working on Old Pig here, the Alaskan Overland rig. Pig's a 2001 LB7 Duramax, GMC Sierra, crew cab, long bed, dually. And anybody who owns an old Chevy truck from the early 2000s knows that they come with a really small transmission cooler. And for daily driving, it might be all right, but if you find yourself in a scenario where it's really hot out, you're towing a big load, you're hauling a camper, you're going up steep grades at a really slow pace with no wind, your transmission tends to overheat. And that is a big issue that we can resolve for pretty cheap and pretty easy. So what I did is I bought a universal transmission cooler that is about twice the size, twice the capacity, twice the cooling capabilities, for about a third of the cost of the leading brands out there, and I gave it a shot. Just gave it the old college try to see what happens and see how I like it. And at the end of this video, you're going to want to stick around because I've now had this transmission cooler installed in Pig for about 3 months now, so I do have some real life experience with it, and I want to share that with you. But first, let's go ahead and show you what we're working with, show you what's in the kit, show you what worked, what didn't work, and what I did to make it fit on such a big ass rig like Pig here. Alright, let's get to it. Okay, let's show you what came with the transmission cooler kit. I'm going to tell you what I like and what I don't like about it. So what I like about it is that it is really big compared to the stock one, and I'll show you a side-by-side comparison once we get the old one out. Also, what I like about it is it comes with mounting brackets that we can cut the size and put pretty much anywhere. Comes with all the hardware, all the fittings, comes with all the clamps and screws and nuts that you need. And then it comes with like maybe about 3 feet of hose that you'll need as well. And now, because this is oversized, it's not going to fit directly into the transmission lines like the PPE one is designed to do. This one is a bit longer, which is kind of a neat design. It's going to pull in a lot of air, or it's going to capture a lot of air. Let's see. So that being so, we are going to have to cut the transmission lines. So you are going to need to pick up a little pipe cutter. What I don't like about this kit is that these are brass fittings, and you guys in the marine world know that aluminum and brass does not play together very well due to the electrolysis between the two. And so in the marine world, this is a big no-no. You do not put these two together because it causes some extreme corrosion. Now in the truck world, I do live in Alaska, I do live on the coast, so it is pretty salty, and they do salt our roads still. So we're going to see how well this holds up in this environment. Pretty much every kit that I've seen made by different companies that has a cooler like this in a pretty much identical setup, they all use brass fittings. That's pretty bad. But the point of this exercise is I'm going to try the kit out as it is, and if this does start to corrode, and we do see that, then I'm going to go ahead and pull all these fittings out, and I'm going to replace them with stainless fittings, which is what the kit should have came with to begin with, as far as I'm concerned. It would be worth the extra money to reduce that electrolysis, in my opinion. But so far I haven't read that anybody had an issue with it on their trucks. Granted, there hasn't been any long-term reviews that I've seen on the internet as well, so stay tuned, because that will be a future episode. We'll check this. We'll check this again in a year and see what it's like if it hasn't started to corrode by then. But that is the kit, guys. Comes with everything that you need. And let's go ahead and get to taking apart the front end here so that we can get to installing this. First thing we got to do is remove the top part of this shroud here. So we got to remove all of these clips. You guys are pretty familiar with these. I bought a bunch of extra these clips so I can replace these. And it came with this sweet little tool. You can also use a screwdriver if you want, but I'll try to remember to put a link in, because these clips break, and if you got an old truck like mine, you're probably already missing a bunch of them. But I'll show you how to use this tool. Pretty easy. Slip it in there, pry that up, get underneath the bottom part, Bob's your uncle. I'll go ahead and take out the rest of them now. To remove this grill, we have 4 of these clips here. It takes a screwdriver, twist it to the left. And there's one here, and one here as well. And the only other thing you have is a 10 mil right there. Oh, that one's broken on mine. And then there's just some clips, so this pops off pretty easy. So kind of the bummer thing for me is I really like how these lights look up here. However, there's not going to be any room with that new transmission cooler, so I got to remove these. The thought did occur to me that I could mount it behind this mounting bracket or this brace, but that will block some of the air and defeat the purpose a little bit. Although I think ultimately it would be fine, but I think I still want to put the transmission cooler on the outside of this big A bracket looking thing. As you can see, this transmission cooler is significantly smaller than the new one. Let me show you. So there's going to be quite a bit of difference between the flow. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these lights here, get those out of the way, and then we'll get to that cooler. Alright, let's get ready to remove the transmission cooler here. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect these lines. And so we got to take this little plastic covering off, and you can just pry it down with a screwdriver. The only thing that's really holding these lines in is this metal clip right there. Kind of looks like a clip like your like that holds on your doorknobs here. And we can just, I'm going to use a pick to hook in there, try to pull this thing out. It's a little rusty. I actually see a decent amount of rust in here, which doesn't make me super hopeful that our brass fittings is not going to rust everything out. Okay. That's what your clip looks like. Mine's a little bent up now. Go ahead and do the same thing over here. Now I got my oil catch under here, because as soon as we pop these lines, it's going to make a little bit of a mess. Pull down, but mine is a bit rusty. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of assembly lube, or penetrating oil. Tap this down. There we go. Gonna create a bit of a mess. Okay, looks like we got a couple of bolts to unloosen, as well as we got one of these little clips again on either side. Go ahead and get my tool. These are 10 mils. 2 10 mils. And that pops right out. Alright, just look at all that surface area, guys. This cooler is significantly bigger than the other one. Should flow very nicely. This old one's a little beat up too, but that is a lot more capacity there. And with this newer one, we are going to need an extra quart of automatic transmission fluid to make up for that extra capacity. So this should be pretty nice. So next, we have to mount this somewhere. Probably going to put it right here, but as you see, this brace is in the way. So I'm going to take a tip from another YouTuber's book and remove this, cut off the ends right here with an angle grinder and flip it around so that we can use a nice flush surface to mount. And then we'll get to cutting our lines here. Okay, these are also 10 mils. Okay, gotta get rid of this little guy, and that'll come off with an 8 mil. Okay, ready to mount this now. At least start lining it up where we want it. I think I want it to be something like this. Use a silver marker here to mark where I want to drill my holes. So we got our bolt here, with our little locking washer. Go ahead and get this lined up. One. Oh, that is not quite lined up. Okay. Get those more or less in place. Okay, I think I'm going to bolt this on something like this. I'm actually not going to use the supplied hardware. I'm going to reuse these mounting bolts that I took off that were holding up my lights back there. So it just works out a little better. And go ahead and I'm gonna mark this off where I'm gonna cut. Right about there should be fine. Something like that will work. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other side after I get it drilled in. Same thing for this side. Kind of mark this where I want it. About there. Get that more straight. Okay. 1 second. Got this little lip in my way. Here's where we are right now. We got it mounted up. The bolts are not fully tightened yet, but here is the size difference. Pretty significant, I'd say. I think it looks pretty nice on there. Pretty well centered. So we did run into one snag, guys. So let's get you in here. Our transmission lines, pretty gargantuan. With this hose that is supplied, it's 3/8, and when we cut this, that's not going to slip right over. I want to say it's more like a, what do I got here, 1/2 inch. Might be more like a 1/2 inch, or even 5/8. So I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to run to a auto parts store or hardware store and try to match it up. And while I'm there, I'm going to see if I can find some stainless fittings, because this is going to mount right in here like this. Like I said, brass on aluminum does not agree with each other as far as corrosion goes, so if I can find some other fittings that fit better, that would be excellent. But essentially, what I'm going to do here is cut this back here so that when I run it, it's not going to be all kinked and it will be able to plug right in. The same thing with this side. Probably cut it down in here and then just run a tube up. So I'm going to go ahead and run to the store, see if I can find parts that I need, and I'll be back with you. Actually, first I'm going to go ahead and cut these lines here, make sure that my pipe cutter is big enough for that, otherwise I got to get another pipe cutter. So actually I'm going to go ahead and cut this right now. So I don't know if you've ever used these pipe cutters before, but make sure you can see this. But essentially, we'll be tightening it up and spinning it around. And tighten, spin, tighten, spin, tighten, spin. So I think I'm going to do this probably right about here. We'll tighten it up. Point of no return now, guys. Might be screwing myself over. Point of no return, guys. We got it cut. see if this 1/2 inch will fit. 1/2 inch is going to be too small, so I'm going to go ahead and take this to the hardware store and try to find me some hose and some fittings that actually will work, because now I cut this son of a bitch off, so now I have to make it work. So I'll be right back. And there she is. This took me a little longer than I thought to find the right adapters. In fact, I didn't find the exact ones that I needed. That's just kind of how it is in this town. So I cobbled something together. I actually used some flare bits that were inversed compared to this one. Like it flared up, kind of like whoosh. And so I took a drill bit, drilled it down until it looked like that, and smoothed it out with a little sander, and it fit up just fine. See how far back I cut the hoses so that there wasn't any major kinks, and I plugged directly into those hoses so that the transmission fluid is still circulating through the radiator, and that serves as a double function. When it's cold out like it is here right now, while the truck's warming up, it's going to circulate transmission fluid through the radiator, and while it's circulating that warmer coolant, so it's going to help warm up that transmission before we drive. The other thing it helps do is it'll be kind of a symbiotic relationship, if you will, between the transcooler and the radiator, in that they'll help each other stay cool and help each other warm up when they need to, just like having extra radiators. But as you can see, I kind of banged mine up a little bit. Tried straightening it out the best I could, but that's just kind of what happens. Or that's what happened to me. You guys, I'm sure, can be more careful. But the mounting worked out pretty good. I used some self-tappers ultimately to tap these in right here. That worked out great. I cut off these mounts, or the mounting brackets right here, so it cleaned it up a little bit. I mean, it's not 100%, but it cleaned up a little bit. And it's on there really solid now. I actually already warmed up the truck, and this feels nice and warm from that radiator fluid warming up the transmission fluid and circulating it through here. And it ran just great, so I'll go ahead and start it up for you. Guys, that is the job. Since this is a bigger cooler, you will need to add an extra quart of transmission fluid. I'm going to take the opportunity to put in a quart of Hot Shot Secrets TSE in the transmission stiction eliminator. It really does help out the transmission shifts and makes it run nice and smooth. And I forgot to do that the last time I changed my transmission fluid, so now's a great opportunity to go pick up a quart, drop that in there, help the transmission out just that much more. But it was a pretty straightforward job. The only thing that hung up that I don't like is that these are brass bits. Two, I couldn't find stainless versions of the size that I wanted, and nor could I find the correct adapters in the town that I live in, but I live in a small town in Alaska, so we don't have a whole lot of amenities, but I'm sure you guys down south will be able to pick up the right adapters. If you got, a 3500 or Duramax, you are going to need that 5/8 line to go over the piping. So 5/8 line, and then you'll need the corresponding barbed adapter that goes in your radiator. So we're going to go ahead and keep an eye on this and see if corrosion becomes an issue between these brass bits and the aluminum, because via electrolysis. So now all I have left to do is put the grill back together and get that extra quart of Hot Shots transmission stiction eliminator in there, and I think we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and put this back together. Alright guys, that's the job. That's how you install that universal cooler. I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description so you can go check it out for yourself, see if it's something you want to do. As you've seen, the major snag that I had was that it came with a 3/8 hose, and you need a 5/8 hose to fit over the existing cooling lines. I'm sure you can figure out some other route that you want to and you can make it work, but you've seen how I did it. It was pretty straightforward. I just had to get bigger hose and get bigger fittings to connect to that hose. Because I live in a small town, had an issue finding the exact fittings that I needed, but they're pretty common, so you should be able to find them at your local hardware store without any issue. So I've had this thing on the truck for about 3 months now. What do I think about it? How does it perform? So far, so good. It does stay significantly cooler than the stock transmission cooler. I haven't taken it out overlanding yet and up all the big mountains, so the proper test will come this summer. Right now it's the middle of January, so it's pretty cold. And because it has been pretty cold, I'm not sure I'm getting a real accurate reading, but I can say that it's running cooler than it would be if I had the smaller transmission cooler in there. And that's because right now, like when it's 40 degrees out, which I think is what it's doing right now, or 35 degrees out, down to was what it is today, and last week it was negative 17 degrees. The truck really doesn't, the transmission has a difficult time warming up past 100 degrees, and it cools down extremely fast. And I don't have a wind guard or anything on the front of it, so it's just, whatever air is coming through that transmission cooler is doing its thing and keeping that transmission nice and cold. The hottest that I've been able to get it after about 40 miles of driving out the road, really bad weather conditions with 4-wheel drive, so the engine was getting up to temp. The transmission maybe got up to about 105, 110 degrees, and that's about the hottest I've seen. I can't wait until this summer when we get back down to Prince of Wales and we start taking them up mountains, because this truly is why I wanted the transmission cooler. If I was just putting around where I'm at, or if I just daily drove it, or if I was just in town and on long paved stretches of road, probably would have never gotten it, because 98% of the time that I drive pig, that transmission stays, below 210, usually around 200, 180, somewhere in there. It doesn't get too hot at its hottest when it's being worked. However, there's a couple scenarios that I ran into where I was going up a very steep grade for a couple hours. I was just really digging back into those old mountains and those old logging roads, and old pig heated up to about 210 degrees, both the engine and the transmission. And that's not too difficult to believe, because not only are the engine and transmission mated together, but the transmission lines are routed through the actual radiator, and that's to help the transmission fluid warm up while the truck is warming up, because as the engine warms up, it warms up the coolant cycling through the radiator, and so is the transmission fluid, so it helps the transmission warm up. So conversely, when the engine starts to really heat up, or the transmission really starts to heat up, it still has that same exchange in the radiator, and so it kind of warms up both systems at the same time. So this, I think, is going to significantly drop the transmission temperatures and contribution to that overall heating up situation. Now, the next big cooling upgrade that I'm gonna do on Pig is I have in my garage right now a brand new aluminum radiator. It's a little bigger capacity, it's 100% aluminum, and I also got it for about 1/3 of the price of the next leading brand. Actually less than 1/3 of the price, like about 1/8 of the price. So I'm pretty excited for it. Seems to be fairly well built. We'll go ahead and put it to the test though and see if we can't find all the kinks in its armor. So stay tuned for that. If that sounds like your jam, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video so we can disseminate this information out to as many people as possible who might be in the same situation that you and I are in. But I think that's going to do it for this video, guys. Pretty happy with the transmission cooler. I'll leave that link down in the description, and hope this helps you out in some way. We'll see you on the next one.